Welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Frank Cipolla. Lots to cover this week, including a change coming up in the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court. The court's most conservative justice, Antonin Scalia, passed away this week, leaving a gaping hole on the court and an intense battle ahead over who should replace him. On the panel to discuss what happens next is Associate Professor at Ithaca College, Dr. Donovan Brown. Also, the nation's preeminent political psychologist, Dr. Bart Rossi, is joining us today. Albert Goldson, who is an executive and business management firm executive from Indo-Brazilian Associates. And in our Washington, D.C. studio, Reverend Lennox Yearwood. He is head of the Respect My Vote campaign. Gentlemen, welcome. Let's take care of the elephant in the room right off the bat. The Republicans and some of the opponents of the president say he should wait before he makes this appointment and leave it to his successor. Your thoughts?
One of the things I think is fairly interesting is that you'll see the line over and over again that we had never confirmed a justice in 80 years during an election year.
Right.
It's misleading. One of the key points is that rarely have you seen a Supreme Court justice vacate the bench during an election year. So you think about that and kind of some of the politics surrounding everything today. This is really a referendum against the president.
I'm curious, Albert, where the U.S. Senate gets off, to use the term, dictating to the president about when he, or if the president was a female, she should decide when to nominate somebody. Is there precedent in that at all?
Well, as far as I can see, the Senate has been bullying President Obama for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. And without a doubt, I'm certainly sure that President Obama, this is the last year of his presidency, will certainly go forward forcefully, if need be, to be able to nominate his candidate for the remaining seat. So without a doubt, President Obama will go forth. It's been tete-a-tete between President Obama and the Senate for a long time. This is just an ongoing battle, and President Obama certainly is going to look forward to winning this one last battle before he leaves office.
Albert makes a great point. You're a psychologist. The president's been knocked around in lots of ways, disrespectfully, in my view at least, over the last 8 years or so. How does he keep his calm? How does he keep his cool in all this?
Well, he's a good thinker. He's a solid thinker. He's very deliberate, of course. He has a lot of traits that are, I think, part of a winning personality. That's why he won twice with more than 50% of the vote. But I think in this case, the psychology is really quite overwhelming. I mean, the Constitution is the Constitution, and Republicans want to talk about it. It's his job to nominate someone. So I think he should nominate someone and make it a rather moderate, maybe somewhat left-leaning person like this Srinivasan, the person who was nominated for the federal position with a 97-0 vote.
Right.
Now, think about the psychology of this. If that happened, then the Republicans would have to vote on someone that passed 97-0. And if they say no, well, then they look bad, and then this goes right back into the election, and Hillary or whoever is going to be the nominee will then highlight this,
right,
and the Republicans will look bad. So either way, I think the president is going to win. I think he's going to look good, and I think he should do it sooner than later. And if the Republicans are smart, they would actually vote for a reasonable nominee and then say that they're not obstructionistic.
All right, Reverend Yearwood in our Washington, D.C. Bureau, exactly how do you see this coming down?
Well, I agree with the last speaker. I mean, I think that it's clear that the Americans need a process, a court process that works for everyone, that doesn't be caught up in the partisan gridlock that we've seen. The Supreme Court is too important to play around with. Clearly it's our third branch of government, and it has to be something that everyone can be a part of. And so I think that the last caller's comments that this is about Republicans not being obstructionists is very important. And I think that it's important for our country as we move forward in 21st century to the importance of putting forth democracy. And let me just say this, that Antonin Scalia, as you know, as he's being laid to rest today, will be known as one of the most influential justices of this court. And while many didn't disagree with him or agree with him, I think that we should definitely respect him for what he has done as a service to this country. And I think it's so important that we don't forget what he did, but even more importantly, I think he would want his seat to be filled.
All right, well, let's hold there. We have some comments from the candidates out in the field. We're going to play them in just a second. But I was kind of surprised that there was commentary about who should be appointed, or whether the president might wait, within 3 hours of Scalia's, at least the report of his death. That's pretty unprecedented as well, isn't it?
Yeah. When you look at Mitch McConnell and his immediate response is, oh, well, there's no way, no how that we're going to approve anything for this president.
But why would you do something like that?
Well, you know, I think...
First of all, you don't look good, number one, right? Number two, you're dictating to the president what you think should happen. And number three, at least wait 24 hours.
Yeah, you know, depending on who you talk to, and if you ask me, I thought it was simply poor timing and poor taste, given the passing of Justice Scalia. But again, a referendum against the president, this is obstructionist politics at its finest, and I'm very curious to see how this is going to move forward.
All right, now, as you might imagine, some of the presidential candidates did have some comments with regard to this. I know it's shocking to you, but let's take a look at some of the comments that they did have with regard to Antonin Scalia's passing.
I am absolutely adamant that the president, under our Constitution, has a duty to send forth a name to be considered by the Senate. And the Senate has a duty to consider that.
To my colleagues in the United States Senate, you talk about the Constitution a whole lot. Well, how about obeying the Constitution and start holding hearings when President Obama nominates the next Supreme Court justice?
I wish the president would think about not nominating somebody. If he were to nominate somebody, let's have him pick somebody that is going to have unanimous approval and such widespread approval across the country that this could happen without a lot of recrimination.
I do not believe the president should appoint someone, and it's not unprecedented. In fact, it's been over 80 years since a lame duck president has appointed a Supreme Court justice.
The President of the United States, we want a strong executive for sure, but in return for that, there should be a consensus orientation on that nomination, and there's no doubt in my mind that Barack Obama will not have a consensus pick when he submits that person to the Senate.
And the stakes of this election for this year, for the Senate needs to stand strong and say, we're not going to give up the U.S. Supreme Court for a generation by allowing Barack Obama to make one more liberal appointee. And then, for the state of South Carolina, one of the most important judgments for the men and women of South Carolina to make is who on this stage.
Now, in a more polite political environment, years ago, a president was an extension, or the Supreme Court justice was the extension of the president. If he was liberal, he'd appoint somebody liberal. If he was conservative. Nowadays, it seems as though that power or that respect in the Senate is gone. So you mentioned that he might appoint a moderate. Is that the only way to go, Albert?
Well, the whole environment, political environment, for quite a long time has been highly polarized. I just want to follow up on what Dr. Rossi said before. Let's say President Obama does nominate someone who's moderate. The GOP is playing a huge gamble, rolling the dice, assuming they will be winning the presidential election. What if they lose? What if Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders wins and nominates someone who is far more liberal than the GOP could ever imagine? Then you would really get into a real maelstrom there. So the GOP is, again, playing with fire. You know, they're between a rock and a hard place. You can try to work out something now, which is going to be quite difficult, but I think something will be done, or stall it and wait until after the election, assuming that they win.
You know, now hold on just a second. Reverend Yearwood, you are, among other things, with the Hip Hop Caucus, and I would think that you would probably, like many Americans, like to see an appointee that more reflects the president's views, which would be moderate to liberal. Would I be right with that?
Well, I mean, I think we want an appointee who values the court. I think many people we've seen with Robert, many folks on the right don't like him now because of his views with health care. He didn't clearly help them to repeal that process. So one thing we've seen with those who go on the court, yes, this court is divided, and right now it's down the middle. It's 4-4, and so but we're looking for a court who wants to make sure that all Americans, not just some of what we've been hearing, but all Americans can have their voices heard. This is the importance of strengthening democracy. When people feel that the court can't be utilized in that process, for those people, young people of color, when they can look back in history and see Brown v. Board of Education or Plessy v. Ferguson, and they can petition this court to make them equal in this process or not moving forward, if it's affirmative action, if it's unions, whatever it may be. I think that people in this country want to know that this court is not partisan. This court really will go by the Constitution and make sure that the values of this country are held. If that's not the case, and we're beginning to play partisan politics with this court, this country is going on a very, very dangerous path.
Reverend, you make a good point. One of the functioning areas of the government that usually function and has been for a long time has been the U.S. Supreme Court as opposed to Congress. And now we have a situation where it may not function properly. And as is the case, a lot of the issues that the court has to decide are really hot button issues this year. Let's talk about one of them, immigration. We're looking at the possibility of a 4-4 tie unless there's a justice on that court. And that just kicks it down the road and kicks it into the political season and even more into the presidential election. Let's start with you, Dr. Rossi. There's a psychology behind immigration as well, isn't there?
Well, the GOP is really in what psychologists call a classic approach avoidance conflict here. They really should approach this whole thing about immigration, but they really don't want to even approach it at all. So they're in a dilemma. And I think they're losing. And this whole situation with Mitch McConnell, I think he's overplaying his hand. I think on that clip, by the way, I think you saw why Bernie Sanders has made himself a real candidate. That's a good clip. I mean, he talks about the Constitution as it really is. Right. So he throws it right back at Mitch McConnell. And all of these cases are going to be affected by this. And I think he's just going about this the wrong way. He should have said, President nominates, and we'll look at that person carefully, and they could vote up or down, and they would look good. Right. Now they're going to look bad, and they're actually playing into the president. The president is holding the cards right now, as far as I'm concerned, and he's going to look good one way or the other.
Now, but Professor Brown, even if we do get a Supreme Court nominee and he's appointed, is there enough time for that nominee to review all the cases out there and join in on the vote at the end of this session?
Yeah.
Or will it be kicked down the road anyway?
That's going to be a fairly interesting question. The Senate has never taken any more than 125 days to vote on the nominee. Right. And I'm curious if we're going to see that 125 days go further to 225 days if we even get a vote at this point. So a lot remains to be seen. I guess everyone is kind of hurry up and waiting to see what the nominee or who the nominee may be from the president.
But even if that nominee is nominated by the president, will he or she be appointed in time to actually effectuate a vote here?
I'm really not certain. Unfortunately, it's going to depend with the unfortunate gridlock pertaining to partisan politics. If they were to get nominated and voted upon successfully and confirmed, possibly. But at this rate, it's really anybody's call.
Albert Goldson, you deal with executives all the time. Good move by Mitch McConnell, or going to Dr. Rossi's point, should he have maybe couched the statement a bit?
Well, he could have couched the statement much better. The GOP is not known for their diplomacy, diplomatic language, or finesse. So it really rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And one of the key issues also is a lot of cases with respect to big business as far as labor laws are concerned, workers' rights, etc. Right. So there are a lot of maybe lesser cases, but they are still on the front burner to be decided. So again, the GOP is looking for a very pro-business type nominee.
Well, you also have abortion out there as well, and that's probably the biggest hot button issue there. State of Texas trying to curtail or at least restrict abortions. That's got to be number one on your list as far as hot button issues.
It is, and I think most people in the country go in the direction, even though they certainly don't like abortion, they go in the direction of a woman having at least the right to choose with regard to her own body. Most polls go in that direction. But the thing that I don't get about the Republicans when it comes to this abortion issue and where it's going with the Supreme Court is, well, they don't really make sense on this. Some of them are even taking a position even in rape and incest. So this is really going to be the hottest button item, I think, on the Supreme Court. And again, not having an associate justice on the court seems bizarre. I mean, they're the ones that talk about the Constitution. It's the Constitution, and what are we going to do? Wait for a new president, then another nominee, and then the vetting process. Now we're talking about a year or more. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and you don't look good by going down this road.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time. Reverend Yearwood, thank you very much for joining us in our D.C. Bureau, and Dr. Rossi, Albert Goldson, and also Don. Some of you will be back, so we'll get back on the panel in just a moment. But Speaking of legal matters, when we return, the high-profile battle between Apple and law enforcement, and your privacy is smack dab in the middle of it. We'll be right back.